What is going on, everyone? It is Connor, your co-host with the most, back here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. We are at past week 15 of the NFL season, heading into week 16. And on this episode of Clutch Crew Sports, we're going to be talking about the front runners for the 6 major awards that are being given out, the NFL honors, that being Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Defensive and Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and MVP. Going to be talking about the front runners, potential candidates for those awards, and who I think should win those awards at the end of the year. So let's get right into it. Like I said, we're going to go around the shield and talk about the NFL honors. Like I said, those are the 6 major awards that are given out at the NFL honors every year. There's also, of course, the Hall of Fame inductees, which I'll be talking about those in a future episode once they narrow the list down to the 15 finalists. And then, of course, there's also the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, but that's kind of impossible to predict because they don't narrow that down to the 3 finalists until pretty late in the year. So, but these are the other 6 major awards. So what I'm going to be doing for each one is we're going to be talking about who the current frontrunner is, if there is one, as well as potential people that could still be contending for the award, and also for the Rookie of the Year awards, the Defensive Player of the Year award, and the MVP award. We're going to be recapping and looking back at, for those of you who watched our Week 1 preview episode way back when, going to be going over what Zach and Eric and I predicted and see where our predictions lie for these awards this year. So we're going to get right into it here, starting off with Coach of the Year, which was won by Mike Vrabel last year. I will say one thing that is kind of nice for all these awards is that the people who won the awards last year are not in contention this year. So there's going to be different candidates for every single award. There's not someone who could potentially repeat. Of course, the Rookie of the Year is like people can't repeat in that award, but and also you can't really repeat in Comeback Player of the Year. But for like Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, and Coach of the Year, we have all new candidates this year. So right now, looking at the front runner for Coach of the Year, we do have Nick Sirianni from the Philadelphia Eagles, and no question he should definitely be the front runner right now. The Eagles, they're 13-1. They're on the brink of winning the NFC East. They're on the brink of clinching the number 1 seed in the NFC. Like I said, they've only lost 1 game all year, and that was to the Washington Commanders. They could potentially get a second loss this week. They are playing the Cowboys in Dallas, and there's the potential that Jalen Hurts might not play. But, like I said, they just need one more win to clinch the division and clinch the number 1 seed in the NFC, because they do own the tiebreaker over the Vikings since they beat the Vikings earlier this year. So it's really been a magical season for the Eagles. I mean, I definitely thought that the Eagles would be better this year. I thought that they would, Zach and I predicted them to win the division. I thought that they were going to be able to take it from Dallas this year, but I definitely did not expect them to be, where they are at right now, 13-1, potentially getting the 1 seed. I thought, maybe they'd have a chance of like the 3 or the 4 seed being a division winner, but they've definitely shocked a lot of people. Jalen Hurts is playing like an MVP candidate. Their offensive line is the best in football. Their defense has been really good as well. So really everything seems to be going right for the Eagles right now. It will be interesting to see how they do when they get to the playoffs. I released a video a couple weeks ago talking about the NFC East and, how they have played a bit of an easier schedule. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how they start matching up. They did play the Vikings, but I definitely want to see them play against like the 49ers and, how they're going to do against Dallas the second time around, because the first time they played Dallas had Cooper Rush in at quarterback instead of Dak Prescott. So definitely going to be, and I would also love to see them matching up against the AFC, because I've long thought that the AFC is, still the better conference and still has a better chance to win the Super Bowl. So definitely going to be exciting to see how it goes for them in the playoffs. So Nick Sirianni is the front runner. The 2 candidates that are also still in contention right now, we have Robert Saleh from the New York Jets. He's been in contention pretty much the whole season. The Jets they've also had a really good year. A lot of people expected them to, still be cellar dwellers in the AFC East, which, when it all comes down to it, they might still finish last in the AFC East. There's still a chance for that. But, it's the fact that they are 7-5-1 right now is a lot better than anyone thought they would be. I'm pretty sure everyone thought at this point in the season they'd be like, 2-11 or something like that, 4 and 10 or something right now. I'm sure a lot of people thought they would be in that range, but being 7-5-1, they still have a chance to make the playoffs as well. That is a little bit more slim given that some of the teams ahead of them, like the Ravens and the Dolphins, are in better positions to get those wild cards, but they do still have a chance to make the playoffs. And it's really been their defense. And Robert Saleh, he's a defensive-minded head coach. Their defense has been amazing. Sauce Gardner's looking like a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. And just a lot of the other pieces on that defense have been really good for them. The offense has struggled at times. They obviously have the whole situation at quarterback right now with, Zach Wilson. He came back and then got benched for Mike White. And, Mike White's still the presumptive starter. The only reason why he's sitting is because of the injury that he suffered when they played against the Bills. So Saleh is definitely still in contention. He is a little bit behind, though. Definitely would need something drastic to happen to the Eagles or something drastic to happen for the Jets for him to be able to take over. But the one guy who's definitely been surging over the past few weeks, and, he started out as a candidate for this at the start of the year and then really dropped off, but now he's back in contention, is the Lions head coach, Dan Campbell. And, the Lions, they started out 1-6, but, a lot of people thought that they were like a really good-looking 1-6 team. And ever since that, they've been 6-1, and they're 7-7 right now. They're back in the hunt for the playoffs in the NFC. And this is definitely probably one of the most fun teams to watch in the NFL right now. Their offense is completely explosive. Jared Goff has really had, a really good year under center for them. Amon-Ra St. Brown's been one of the top receivers in the league this year. And they have a really good running back tandem going on there with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift when he's healthy. And the defense has gotten better as well. That was the reason why they were losing a lot of these games early in the season, was even though the offense was putting up points, the defense just couldn't stop the other team. And the defense has definitely gotten a lot better, and that's led to why the Lions are doing better. I do think personally that if the Lions manage to come out and win all of their remaining games, if they can somehow finish the year 10-7, I would actually give head coach of the year to Dan Campbell, because at least from the Eagles' perspective, they did make the playoffs last year, even though they lost in the first round and they were like the 7 seed, they did make the playoffs last year. And while this has been a great year for them, no one expected this to happen for the Detroit Lions. Like, a lot of people expected this out of the Eagles, given all the personnel they brought in, all the moves they made in the offseason. There is no one out there that expected the Detroit Lions to be in playoff contention and potentially in contention for a 10-win season. So, and that's why Dan Campbell's really been surging. Like, he was out of the Coach of the Year race, and now he's definitely back in it. So if the Lions do finish out this season 10-7, I personally would give the award to Dan Campbell. If that doesn't happen, if they finish, 9-8 or 8-9, then I would give it to Sirianni. But I think if the Lions, if they close out the year 10-7, that would have meant that they closed out the year finishing the season 9-1. I would definitely give it to Dan Campbell. So moving on to Comeback Player of the Year, this is an award that was won by Joe Burrow last year, of course, coming back from his torn ACL. The frontrunner for this, no surprise here, is Geno Smith, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. He's had a super up-and-down career. He got drafted by the New York Jets way back when. I think it was 2013 was when he was drafted. Got drafted by the New York Jets, was a starter there for a couple of years, never panned out, ended up going to the Giants to play as a backup. He famously ended Eli Manning's long start streak when the Giants decided that they wanted to bench Eli Manning for Geno Smith. So that was definitely an interesting scenario there. And then, a lot of people just didn't expect a lot from the Seahawks this year with him. They were coming into the season with that quarterback tandem of him and Drew Lock. And, a lot of people, myself included, thought the Seahawks would be at the bottom of the NFC West. This is a rebuilding year for the Seahawks. No way they're going to compete. And, lo and behold, the Seattle Seahawks are in playoff contention right now. They were leading the division for a while. They're not in contention for the division anymore. The Niners wrapped that up when they beat them on Thursday Night Football. But they are still very much in contention for a playoff spot in the NFC. And it'd be amazing for Geno Smith if he were to able to lead this team to the playoffs. the one thing that's definitely hurting Geno Smith in this category is that he is starting to regress. The Seahawks have been losing a lot more recently. They've kind of been like the opposite of the Lions, where they started out really fantastic and they're starting to get weaker, whereas like the Lions started out bad and are getting stronger. The Seahawks, it kind of seems like he might have peaked early, and we've seen the peak of his skills. Now, regardless, a 7 or 8 win season is still really impressive for a quarterback who hadn't had a starting job in a really long time and basically was a career backup. So definitely something drastic would have to happen for him to lose this award. I think basically the Vegas odds have him at like minus 600 right now, which is like a pretty safe bet. But the other two guys that definitely are still in contention for this award, 2 running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. These two guys, they were both fantasy darlings back in 2018, 2019. McCaffrey, of course, he was a massive threat when it came to both running and catching the ball. Saquon Barkley had a monster rookie year and a pretty decent second year, but injuries have really slowed these two guys down. And a lot of people were talking about that, like this season was going to kind of be the last shot for both of them when it came to their respective teams. McCaffrey did end up getting traded away from the Panthers midseason to the Niners, although that wasn't because of his play. It was more so because the Panthers are basically just in blow-it-up rebuild mode right now. But Saquon Barkley, he's definitely came back with a vengeance this year. He is, he's already passed the 1,000-yard rushing mark. He's really been the main driving force on this offense with Daniel Jones, still not being the greatest under center, and the Giants he's the main reason, one of the main reasons why the Giants are having as good of a year as they are. There were some rumors that they were possibly thinking about trading him before the deadline, kind of earlier in the season. They thought that they might trade him to someone like the Bills or maybe even the Niners. But as far as I can tell, that's not going to happen anymore. He's going to be in New York for the long haul. He's definitely proven why he's an elite running back. Probably still not worth that number 2 overall pick that the Giants spent on him, but he's definitely proved that he's still an elite running back in the NFL. And Christian McCaffrey, he's definitely still proved that he's the best dual threat running back in the league. He's like 4th in the league right now in all-purpose yards. He's going to cross the 1,000-yard mark in rushing. He probably won't reach the 1,000-yard mark in receiving. He's kind of around 650 right now, so he would definitely need a big performance there to reach that. But he is going to cross 1,000 yards rushing, which, like I said, definitely proves that he's still the best dual threat running back in the league and a very key piece on the Super Bowl contending Niners. But as of right now, unless Geno Smith just completely starts collapsing, I do think Geno Smith does have this award on lock. It would, like I said, it would take a collapse from Geno Smith for McCaffrey and Barkley to, lose to catch up to him, because at least for McCaffrey and Barkley, like, we know the elite level talent that they have. They had just been slowed down by injuries, and that, they're having really good years. Whereas like Geno Smith, this came completely out of left field. Like, no one expected him to do anything close to what he's been doing this year. Probably going to cross 4,000 yards passing, 30 touchdowns. He's not quite there yet, but more than likely he's going to cross the 4,000-yard mark in passing. He's going to cross 30 touchdowns. So just an absolutely magical comeback season for Geno Smith. So now we're moving on to the 2 Rookie of the Year categories. So now we're getting to the awards that Zach and Eric and I did predict at the start of the year. So we're going to start here with Defensive Rookie of the Year. At the start of the year, Zach and Eric predicted that Trayvon Walker, the number 1 overall pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, would win this award. I myself predicted that Aiden Hutchinson from the Detroit Lions would win this award. And needless to say, Trayvon Walker is not anywhere in the conversation for this. So definitely a big red spot on the board there for Zach and Eric. He's had an okay rookie year, but he's never really across the entire season ever been in consideration for this award. But Aiden Hutchinson has, so we'll start with the front runner though for this award. I'll get to Hutchinson in a minute. The front runner is, of course, Ahmad Sauce Gardner, the number 4 overall pick for the New York Jets. And he's basically been been the second coming of Darrelle Revis in New York. He's been a shutdown corner in every sense of the word. He's, it's kind of hard to describe how seasons go for defensive backs, but, he's had just a fantastic rookie season. He hasn't really given up any sort of big plays or anything in coverage. He's been a real key reason why this Jets defense has been so good this year. He's only got 2 interceptions on the year, but interceptions are definitely a lot more of a they're definitely a lot of kind of like a false, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's a very deceiving stat. Like, just because you don't have a lot of interceptions doesn't mean you're not a good corner. I mean, you can look at Trayvon Diggs last year as like a good example of, he had 11 interceptions last year, which was the most that we had seen in a really long time. But on the flip side of that, the reason why he had 11 interceptions for the most part was because everyone kept throwing at him because he gave up over 1,000 yards in coverage, which is really bad. So it's like, whereas if you're a player like Sauce Gardner, we saw this with Darrelle Revis and we saw this with like Patrick Peterson in his prime. They don't have huge interception numbers because no one throws at them. They're really afraid to throw at them because they're so good and they're so, the best of their position that you just pick on other corners. You don't throw at them. So it's the reason why they don't have a lot of interception stats. I mean, he's only allowed 26 catches this year, which is, a really low number considering how many games they've played. So he's definitely the clear front runner for this award, no doubt about it. I think the Vegas odds have him at minus 400 right now. So definitely going to be interesting for him. But the 2 guys that are still in contention for this award, I mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. He's in second place right now, basically, in terms of like catching up to him to win this award. He definitely had a bit of a slow start to the year. But I mean, he's had a decent rookie year. He's got 7 sacks. He's, again, been a key piece as to why this Lions defense has gotten a lot better over the past few weeks. He's actually got 2 interceptions on the year, which for a edge rusher is really impressive. He does have a touchdown on the year as well. So he's definitely come on a lot as of late. And, like I said, he started slow. The Lions defense started slow, though, so it's not surprising that as he's gotten better, the Lions defense has gotten better. And while I'm not sure that he's going to win the award this year, I definitely think he does have, a good long future in front of him playing for this Lions team. It just kind of it took him a little bit to get used to the game, but that's kind of how it is with all these rookies. They kind of have to get used to the NFL speed, and basically, once they start getting used to the NFL speed, edge rusher is one of the quickest positions that you can adapt to. And so it's why you see a lot of these edge rushers that come straight out of college and, just dominate in the NFL, because it's a really easy position to translate to the NFL. So, like I said, he's definitely had a really good season so far. But the other guy that's also still in contention for this is Tariq Woolen for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, he, on the other hand, he definitely was not as highly touted of a prospect as, Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley, or there was another corner in the draft. I can't remember, but, he wasn't taken until the 5th round of the draft, so definitely way, way deep in the draft class. But he's been a really solid piece for the Seattle Seahawks. Like I said, their defense has gotten a lot better, too. He's got 6 interceptions on the year, which actually leads the league right now. The only problem for him when it comes to this award is, I mentioned, when it comes to Sauce Gardner, that interceptions can be a little bit of a deceiving stat. That, like I said, he does have 6 interceptions, but he also hasn't been the greatest cover man in the NFL so far this year. He's done a decent job in coverage, but he definitely hasn't been a shutdown corner like Sauce Gardner has. But, he does have the interception, so that definitely boosts up his resume. But all in all, for Woolen and Gardner, I mean, really impressive for them. I mentioned with Hutchinson that edge rusher is probably like the position that you can get suited to the NFL the quickest. Corner is probably one of the hardest positions to get equated to the NFL speed and the NFL playbooks, and Sauce Gardner and Woolen have done a great job with that. But in my opinion, I definitely think that Sauce Gardner is going to take this award once it's all said and done. Like, unless he gets injured, I think he's got this award locked up. So moving on to we have Offensive Rookie of the Year. This is the only award. This was won by Jamar Chase last year. I forgot to mention that obviously Defensive Player of the Year was Rookie of the Year was won by Micah Parsons last year. Jamar Chase, of course, was Rookie of the Year last year for offense, and this is the only award here of the 6 that I'm doing that there's not a true front runner right now. We have 4 guys that are basically competing for this award. If you have to go just based on odds, technically the front runner right now is Garrett Wilson from the New York Jets, but it's like razor thin. Like, it's not like with these other guys in these other categories where they're like clear front runners. Wilson, even though he's technically the front runner, is a very, very small front runner. So we have Wilson from the Jets, we have Christian Watson from the Green Bay Packers, Kenneth Walker from the Seattle Seahawks, and Chris Olave from the New Orleans Saints. None of these guys were picked by Zach and Eric and I to win the award. I believe I picked Breece Hall to win this award, which unfortunately for me, he was the front runner before he went down with the season-ending injury. I know Zach took James Cook from the Buffalo Bills, who hasn't really been much of a factor this year. And Eric took, let me check my notes here real quick. I have to remember who Eric picked. Eric picked Drake London from the Atlanta Falcons, which he, kind of like Breece Hall, was one of the front runners for this award early in the season, but he's definitely fallen off as the year has gone on. But when it comes to these guys, really, I will say Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are basically mirror images of each other. I mean, they've got virtually the same amount of yards, the same amount of catches, same amount of touchdowns. They both played with mediocre quarterback play. You know, Wilson has had Mike White and Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson throwing to him. Olave's had Andy Dalton throwing to him for most of the year. Olave's also not had the help. You know, we talked about this early in the year when I talked about how much I liked Olave, and Eric was saying how he wasn't sure about Olave, winning Rookie of the Year just because there's so many other receiving threats on that Saints team with like Kamara, Mike Thomas, Jarvis Landry. Michael Thomas has been injured the whole year. Jarvis Landry's basically been injured the whole year. So Olave's really had to step up and be the number one receiver on this team. So, good on him for stepping up. Watson, I really don't understand why he's really in the conversation for this right now. He's got 7 touchdowns, but he's only got like 450 yards and only 30 catches on the year. I know he's had a really good past few games, but in an overall season of work, I think Wilson and Olave easily trump Watson with their body of work. Walker's definitely been an interesting case as well, just because, he didn't really play all that much at the start of the year. The Seahawks thought they were going to have that running back tandem of Chris Carson and Rashad Penny, but obviously Carson didn't even start the year, and then Penny went down with an injury, so Walker's been forced into the number one running back role, and he's really stepped into it really well. He's been having a great rookie year as well. He does still have some injury concerns, which is why I think he's going to get held back from this, but, he's 700 rushing yards right now. He's got, 9 rushing touchdowns. Definitely a very respectable year for a rookie running back, but in my opinion, this is going to come down to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Like I said, they've been mirror images of each other. They've been the wide receiver one on their team. But if they've got mirrored stats, then I have to go based on record. And right now, the Jets have a better record than the Saints. Like I said, quarterback play is even to me as well. I think you first look at stats and you look at quarterback play. And when those are both even, I think you have to go just based on the record of the team. And like I said, the Jets have a much better record than the Saints right now. So I guess I'll have to go with Garrett Wilson here. It's hard to kind of put that on them since football is a team sport. But, I think Garrett Wilson takes this award for me right now. So then moving on to the last 2 awards here, we have Defensive Player of the Year, which of course was won by my boy TJ Watt last year. And for early season predictions for this, another one that we all got wrong. I predicted that TJ Watt would actually repeat in this category, but unfortunately he went down with an injury early in the year, so he had absolutely no chance of winning it. Zach predicted that Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers would win it, which he also has not really been in contention at all for this award this season. The closest of the 3 of us to getting this right was Eric with Myles Garrett, who he was in contention for a little bit of the season, but really the Defensive Player of the Year award is down to 2 people. There's no one else who are even in the same hemisphere as these guys when it comes to being in contention right now, and that is Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. Parsons is the front runner right now. He's got 13 sacks on the year right now. He's, been, of course, a game-changing force on this Dallas defense. They've definitely continued their success from last year. I was definitely a bit skeptical about their defense. I was like, okay, are they going to be able to, keep up what they were doing last year? And they definitely have kept it up. Their defense has been the strong point on the Cowboys this year. So Micah Parsons has definitely been the front runner when it comes to this award. He's got 13 sacks on the year. He's definitely helped continue the success for the Dallas Cowboys when it comes to keeping up the success that they had on defense last year. He's really been a key factor on it. Like I said, 13 sacks, 3 forced fumbles on the year. Very, very good there. And the Dallas defense has been the strong point of the Cowboys this year. Their offense has been good as well, but their defense is really what's been keeping them in a lot of these games that have been close and, helping make up for when Cooper Rush was in at quarterback. So the other guy, of course, Nick Bosa, he's got 15 and a half sacks on the year, so he's ahead of him on sacks. Only 1 forced fumble on the year, though, so I'm guessing that's probably one of the reasons why maybe, they have Parsons ahead of him, but to me, really, it's a virtual toss-up with these guys. I mean, they both play on stacked defenses. It's not like, one of them is like the sole edge rusher on their team or something like that. When it comes to edge rushers, if it was a situation where like Parsons was playing next to, I don't know, some bum or something on the other side of him, then I would definitely give the edge to someone like him. But they both have really good front sevens already. Parsons gets to play with DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. Nick Bosa, of course, the Niners have a really good defensive line. So neither of them is like, playing on a bad defense and just doing really good. They both play on stacked defenses. Both teams are in the playoff hunt. Both teams are potential Super Bowl contenders. Both defenses are potential Super Bowl contenders. But in my opinion, I would probably have to give the edge to Nick Bosa. Like I said, it's very, very close right now. But just because, I know he's not, the only person on this defense. But when you look at the two teams, which team is the defense more important on? And it's definitely the 49ers. I mean, the 49ers have been playing with a rotating cast of quarterbacks. They had Trey Lance at the start of the year. He got injured. Then they had Jimmy G come in, for most of the season, and now he's injured. And now they've got Brock Purdy playing at quarterback. And, it's like, whereas you look on the other side, the Niners, of course, have also had injuries, like Deebo Samuel's hurt right now. George Kittle has definitely been hurt a couple times this year, but he's been healthy for the most part this year. And they've got good weapons there with, McCaffrey and Ayuk and Kittle, all potential Pro Bowl level players. But it's really just that quarterback position that's really, dragged down the Niners' stock in my mind, and why I think the defense is more important. Because if you look at the other side, the Cowboys, just the same as the Niners, have a lot of good weapons. They got Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz is a good tight end. But the key difference for me is that the Cowboys have a Pro Bowl quarterback in Dak Prescott, someone who, is one of the better quarterbacks in the league, whereas the Niners just don't have a quarterback. I mean, no one's going to say that Brock Purdy is a top 15 quarterback in the league or that Jimmy Garoppolo is a top 15 quarterback in the league. So to me, I would have to give this award to Nick Bosa just because, like I said, I mean, he's got more sacks. Parsons has got more forced fumbles. It's, it's a toss-up there. So it has to come down to which team, in my opinion, needs the defense more for their success, and I would have to give it to the Niners. So moving on to the final award, and that is going to be the MVP award, won last year, of course, by Aaron Rodgers. It was his second MVP, although he's not going to be winning it this year. For this award, Eric and I both had Josh Allen winning this award at the start of the year, which he was definitely in contention for a long, long time. He's technically still in contention right now as well, but it's definitely, he would need a miracle to win the award now. Zach picked Justin Herbert to win this award. Herbert's definitely not been in consideration at all for this award this year, so definitely not a good year of predictions on the awards for Clutch Crew Sports when come week 16 of the season, only one of our 12 picks is still in contention for the award we picked them for. So, but anyway, talking about the most valuable player, the current front runner right now is Jalen Hurts from the Philadelphia Eagles. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Sirianni, the season that the Eagles have had has been really good, really magical. And Hurts has been a big part of that. I had my doubts coming into the year about Jalen Hurts, but he's really been a really good quarterback for them, mainly because of his dual threat purpose. He's been a really good passer, but he's been a great rushing quarterback as well. It's why he's the top quarterback in fantasy football right now. He does have 3,400 yards passing, so he has been good in that respect as well, but he's definitely done a lot of damage as well, being a rusher. And this Eagles team is definitely a run-first team anyway. With Miles Sanders at running back and Kenneth Gainwell and a lot of that happening. So they're definitely a run-first team going forward. But 747 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns. Very good for Jalen Hurts. It's just really, for me, his passing stats that really leave a lot to be desired. I tend to put more stock in passing stats when it comes to quarterbacks than rushing stats. He does have 3,400 passing yards, and he does have a good touchdown to interception ratio. He's got 22 touchdowns against 5 interceptions. And of course the Eagles are, doing as good as they are. So definitely not surprised he's the front runner right now. But the two guys that are still in consideration with him, Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs, which he's pretty much been the front runner all year up until the past couple of weeks when Jalen Hurts overtook him as front runner. I mean, Mahomes is just having another Mahomes level season. He's at 4,500 yards passing right now. Definitely has a good chance. He's definitely on track to get past 5,000 yards passing, 35 touchdowns. The Chiefs are 11-3 right now. He did have a pretty bad game against Denver a couple weeks ago, which kind of inflated his interception totals. But overall, I mean, he's just been, a lot of people had their doubts about the Chiefs coming into this year. Like, would they still be the same team without Tyreek Hill? Would they still be, a Super Bowl contender? And I think definitely they've put to bed any doubts about how good they are. They don't need Tyreek Hill to still be one of the best teams in the league and a potential Super Bowl contender because they have Patrick Mahomes. So, and then the other guy also is still in contention, Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's getting close to the 4,000-yard passing mark, 31 touchdowns. The Bengals have had a really good turnaround this year as well. They started out pretty slow, kind of like they did last year, where they started out slow and then ended the season really strong and won the division. They're on track to win the AFC North right now after a little bit of a disastrous start to the year, and Burrow, of course, has been a big reason of that. That Bengals offense is still as good as ever. But when it comes down to who I think should win this award, like I said, I tend to put a lot more stock in passing stats than I do rushing stats when it comes to quarterbacks. And the MVP at this point is basically a quarterback award at this point. I'm not sure I would really consider Joe. I know Joe Burrow is still technically in contention, but I'm not sure I would really consider giving it to him. So really for me, it's between Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. And for me, I mean, like I said, Mahomes is probably going to end the year with 5,000 yards passing unless he gets hurt. He only needs 500 more yards, which over the course of 3 games, 500 yards passing should be easily attainable. He obviously isn't the rushing threat that Jalen Hurts is, but he does still have, 313 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. And just for me, it definitely also comes down to, you have to look at, when it comes to MVP, I look at MVP in the most, literal sense of the word, like the most valuable player on a team. Would your team still be the same without this player? And if I'm being honest, if the Eagles didn't have Jalen Hurts, I definitely don't think they'd be 13-1 right now. I'm not going to go crazy or anything and say, oh yeah, the Eagles would still be 13-1 without him, like blah, blah, blah. Like, I definitely don't think that, but I definitely think the Eagles would still be in playoff contention and potentially, I'm not sure, maybe they'd be in contention for the division, but they'd definitely still be in playoff contention and in contention to do some damage in the playoffs without Jalen Hurts. Like I said, their offensive line is the best in the league. They've got a fantastic rushing game with Sanders and Gainwell and, all the running backs that they have there. Their defense has been playing really well. I definitely still think they'd be decently okay without Jalen Hurts. Whereas if you look at the Chiefs on the other side, I think this team would be lost without Patrick Mahomes. Like, their run game is virtually non-existent most of the time. Pacheco is definitely trying to turn that around and starting to, give this Chiefs team a running game. But, their run game is virtually non-existent. The defense is good, but it's not on the level of, like the Cowboys or the Niners or, some of these other teams that have really good defenses. And, who's to say that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, are as good as they are without having him throwing the ball? Kelce, I think, would definitely still be, very good nonetheless just because of his skill set. But this offense would totally not be able to work the way it does without him there. And to me, the Chiefs would be out of playoff contention right now and potentially looking at a top 15 draft spot if they didn't have him at quarterback. So that's why, in my opinion, I would definitely give the award to Patrick Mahomes, especially if he crosses the 5,000-yard passing mark. I mean, that's just, I know there's an extra game in the season, but he might actually reach 5,000 yards before we even get to that 17th game. So, like, it's possible that he would have reached 5,000 yards even in a regular, in a 16-game season. So, and like I said, I think the Chiefs would be completely lost without him, whereas I still think the Eagles would be decently good even without Jalen Hurts. So, in my opinion, I'd have to give this to Patrick Mahomes once the year is over. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, who you think deserves these awards, if you think any of the contenders should be front runners, if you think the front runners shouldn't be in consideration at all. And, we're getting down, like I said, to the nitty-gritty of the NFL season. We're getting close to the playoffs. We're getting close to the end of Clutch Crew Sports. So make sure you guys hit that like button and stay tuned for all the remaining episodes. We'll have another Lockboard episode coming out on Friday, and we'll go from there. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until then, I will see you guys next time.